It is possible if no other major factor is changed.
Why does it sound like that? Why did they make the choice for it to sound like that? Welcome to Trek Trav. I am Trav, and this is Star Trek the Animated Series, Season 1, Episode 2, Yesteryear, written by D.C. Fontana, a classic series writer. This episode has tons in it, tons of really interesting stuff. So it starts off that they're, for some reason, time traveling through the Guardian at the edge of forever. And they've got big bird people who are historians who are doing all of the sending. And they're giant bird people. They look fantastic, and I'd love to see them in CGI. They would look really, really good. Kirk and Spock come back from researching history, and Spock isn't recognized. Who the hell is Spock, they say. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. They don't recognize who Spock is, and when they beam up from the ship, they assume that it's one of the historians. It's not, it's Spock. And Kirk goes, "You need to respect the first officer." And then an Andorian walks in and he goes, "Well, I'm the first officer, essentially." So we get a first look at an animated Andorian, which also looks really, really cool. And I like that I'm pretty sure it's James Doohan doing the voice, but we get that sort of surprise, and then they try and work out what's going on. They're looking through the history books, what happened. They find out that Amanda and Spock died back in the day because his cousin wasn't there to protect him. And they decided that the cousin was actually Spock going back in time, and because he was already in time, he couldn't go back in time to stop himself from being killed, so now he has to go back in time. Back 30 years. Spock is 30, so he's younger than me, and that annoys me. They send Spock back in time. He's got the garb, and then we're introduced to Vulcan, and I'm pretty sure it's the first time in Star Trek we see Vulcan. It's deserty, lots of triangle shapes, lots of weird architecture. We get introduced to sort of Spock's father again, Spock's mother, Amanda and Sarek, and we get to see Spock's Sailot. I can't even pronounce his name now. Alish, I don't know. But Spock's Sailot. And he's just a big furry cat with some teeth. And Spock introduces himself to Sarek after seeing younger Spock get into a fight with other Vulcans who are picking on him for being half human. And it's really interesting watching it because there's a lot of parallels between this and the Star Trek 2009 movie, with Spock being picked on for having a human mother, for showing too many emotions. Even some of the wording of the way they're said is very, very similar about him showing too much emotion. Sarek sort of having the worries and sort of talking about his son. Spock goes by the name of Salek, and he's a cousin, and he goes back and stays with Amanda and Sarek and Spock. Spock knows that he's got his coming of age trial coming up, which is apparently in like a couple of months, in a month, whereas Spock thought it was right then, and he was a bit confused. Spock's memory is a bit spotty on this one. And we get to see inside their home. Amanda isn't played by the original actress. I'm pretty sure it's Majel Barrett. But the animation is okay. So Sarek talks to Spock and talks about how he's expected to win these trials and how he should win the trial, and he shouldn't fail once. Like a normal Vulcan can fail, he can't fail. And it's really interesting to see that pressure put on young Spock, and it sort of explains that antagonistic growth because they didn't talk in the original series. And Spock talking to his father and sort of trying to get Spock's way across, but not. So little Spock takes it in his head that he needs to prove himself, so he goes to do the trial himself there that night. Older Spock, Salek, goes after him to follow him, and also his Sailot. As they're going through the desert, they get attacked by a big birdie creature, or another big monstrously dragony birdie creature that attacks the Sailot and attacks little Spock. The Sailor gets hurt while Spock defends little Spock, and and basically he stops the attack. But unfortunately, Spock's pet Sailot got scratched and he's poisoned. Older Spock stays with the Sailot while little Spock runs to get help from a healer within the village. He goes through the desert. He runs. It's a sign of his strength and his I want to say his want to succeed in helping his Sailot. There's a little bit of play with the healer where the healer says, "Oh, well, you did the boy cry the wolf," and then he goes, "Yes, but do you call Sarek's son a liar?" And he's like, "No." And then the healer obviously comes. The child actor playing baby Spock is okay, except when he tries to do lines very Vulcan-y, but it's sort of, I suppose, because he's acting Vulcan-y, he's not actually Vulcan-y. The healer comes but can't save poor Sailot. And Spock doesn't remember the Sailot dying. He's genuinely sort of shown as being sad. He's talking to younger Spock, telling him, you wouldn't show your tears, you wouldn't cry. And he tells younger Spock that Vulcans don't not have emotions. They just know how to control them and logically. He brings peace to them. And there's an interesting sort of passing of the knowledge to them. What we didn't learn later on is that Spock also passed the knowledge of a neck pinch. They head home and Spock is apologizing, but he says he needed to do it. And he talks about how he had to make a choice. The Vulcan way or the human way. That was the choices. What did he want to grow up to be? And he says the Vulcan way. And if it was an animation, you would have seen Amanda be a bit disappointed, I imagine, just from the way that it looked. And Sarek sort of enjoying it. Older Spock bids farewell. He leaves. And time is pretty much reset. Spock sort of lets out a little emotion that his pet was something close to him, and I like that. It's that Spock didn't get rid of emotions. He also makes a joke afterwards at Dr. McCoy's expense, and I like that as well, sort of showing that even though he is Vulcan, he still has some of those human attributes and those human emotions. Now, my favorite thing about this episode is there's a lot that's sort of taken. So the Sailot's obviously taken from the original series. It also featured an Enterprise, but in the original series, it was just a big furry cat with teeth. And in Enterprise, it was sort of designed to look like the Sailot from the animated series. Vulcan itself being depicted as this sort of, I want to say sandy culture, but very colorful and very sort of weirdly, I want to say emotional in its design, but not. I like there's a bit at the end where Spock says to Sarek, older Spock, says to Sarek to just accept him for who he is. And I like, there's a lot of tones that they touched on in the Star Trek 2009 movie. And genuinely surprised me because some of the lines were so close. And there was a lot of emotional core to this. Like, obviously, it's a 22-minute episode. It's flying past. They're just trying to get things done. But we're introduced to an alien planet, two alien creatures we've never seen. Like, the alien that attacks, the monster that attacks them is really, really cool. And we get to see these characters' relationships before. But DC Fontana's done something where you can clearly see, like, Spock's frustration as an adult stems from how he was treated as a child, and you can see that. And that's something they had to have taken influence from in 2009. And certainly later on with other Star Treks and such as that. Otherwise, another real banging episode. I don't know why The Guardian on the Edge of Forever is suddenly just a random travel thing, and I don't know why The Guardian on the Edge of Forever now sounds like a whiny ghost. But who knows? Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me what you liked about this episode. There's a lot of weird and lovely sort of lore stuff that sort of began here. And it's just genuinely an all-round fantastic episode. I will see you next week for episode 3.